I'm probably one of the few realtors that I hate realtors. Man, I'm just sick of these guys. I mean, the ethics, the moral fortitude for the average agent. I think a lot of that, unfortunately, stems from the fact that the barrier for entry for a real estate agent is so incredibly low.
If you're buying a home, you should understand the structure of your mortgage. If you don't understand that, then the person that you worked with didn't take the time to educate you on how those dynamics work.
You're really killer if you can get that kind of marketing and be a good, thorough, ethical agent. What are the top 3 questions I should ask my agent?
I tell people all the time, ask them honestly, point blank.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Remnant Finance. We've got with us today Gregg Costin. He is a real estate agent. He's someone who's in our network from the mandate fight. So we are really looking forward to talking about another element of your overall financial picture. I think a lot of people, we just assume that we have to live somewhere. We've always heard home ownership's the American dream. It's something that a lot of people kind of just fall into without being an expert in the process, knowing what they have, understanding the mortgage. And as an education company that wants to kind of bring a rounded overview of all things that we interact with, in our financial lives, this is a great area to talk to because it's something that impacts all of us. So I want to welcome Gregg Costin to the Remnant Finance podcast and give us a little bit of a background, a little bio and your story with the Air Force.
Awesome. No, I appreciate you guys having me on and everything, dude. So a little bit of background about me. So I enlisted straight out of high school when I was 17, went in as a 2MO, which is a nuclear missile maintenance guy. So I worked on outcomes on the B-52. So did that for several years, ended up pushing out, went to college full time, got my commission, earned my GI Bill, and basically OTS my way back into the Air Force. I basically turned down law school and decided I wanted to, continue on and try to reach retirement, and always wanted to fly. I mean, that was always a childhood passion of mine and everything, going to air shows and, flying and being around all that stuff and everything. So, I mean, I was happy I got selected to be a CISO. So I wasn't quite as cool as all the pilots out there and everything. So being a backseat guy, so it got me up in the air, got me up and going. I ended up branching out to AWACS. So I ended up going to Tinker after flight school. Did that for a couple of years and ended up going to Alaska for my final 3. And that was, pretty much right where all the COVID shenanigans happened and everything. So I did a couple of things like overseas for the State Department and Embassy Network and everything. I was chief of plans for IAMD, Integrated Air and Missile Defense Planning for CENTCOM. So I've basically done a whole slew of things between strategic planning, mission planning for, NATO ops, all kinds of other stuff, man. So, I mean, I've never been cool enough to fly the plane, but I've done everything but. So,
Greg, just for anybody that here that isn't in our network, what is a CISO?
So it's a combat systems officer. It's kind of, it's a 3-pronged approach to basically helping out pilots. So we're navigators, we're mission crew commanders, we're electronic warfare officers, we're weapon systems officers, depending on the platform. So we're kind of a Swiss Army knife, depending on where you basically place us, as far as airframe and mission. So, I mean, we can do mission planning, we can do weapons deployment, we can do electronic warfare. So, I mean, we get training and all that stuff. We usually try to specialize depending on, the airframe and kind of where we're going and what we're doing. But I mean, we're pretty much, I guess, the jack of all trades and Swiss Army knife for, the Air Force for anything that isn't, yoke and stick, related, I guess, for aviation.
You're Goose.
I'm Goose. I'm Bob in the back. So
Goose Costin. How did you go from, if you had the same kind of career disruptions that a lot of us had with the mandate, as far as being grounded, being kind of jerked around by the DoD, how did that translate into you becoming a real estate agent? We hit on your experience with the mandate a little bit and how that led you to getting out earlier than planned and how that led you to where you are now.
Man, that is a super interesting story. So I got started in real estate shortly after I commissioned and everything. I always, I grew up basically renovating old Victorian homes with my dad and everything. So I always saw the potential for flips and, the value of real estate and everything growing up. When I got up to tinker and everything, bought my first house, I'm one of those, I got burned by real estate agents early on, man. So I got taken advantage of in a bad deal, and it stuck with me ever since. I mean, I literally sat there and poured everything I had into contract law, finance, you name it, appraisals, inspections. I mean, I basically wanted to become self-reliant because I was so sick of, just real estate agents in general.
Do you mind sharing what happened? Because I think probably 50% of people out there have been burned in some way. Like, what actually happened?
So, man, there was a whole slew of things. I mean, basically, God, we're working with another agent, basically violating fiduciary duties, basically trying to, get a contract. Yeah, they were trying to collude for commissions, basically doing a lot of shady stuff behind the scenes and everything. So I caught them, basically being best friends. I guess they knew each other from previous work relationships. So they were, trying to, oh, this is a great house. You should totally, don't worry about the fine print. Let's push through with the contract and make sure we get to closing so everybody gets paid, and forget about you, forget about, what's, good for your wallet, good with the house. I mean, there was a couple inspection items and disclosures that weren't legally disclosed from the other side, and that was kind of glossed over by my agent at the time. So I mean, there was just a whole slew of things that just kind of really just didn't give me the warm and fuzzies. Like I initially walked away from it, I was like, man, I'm just sick of these guys. I mean, like, the ethics, the moral fortitude for the average agent. I mean, I think a lot of that, unfortunately, stems from the fact that, the barrier for entry for a real estate agent is so incredibly low. I mean, like, I probably shouldn't even be saying this, but I mean, like, I didn't even study for my state exam. I mean, like, I was able to like walk in and basically, just take it just from, my experience, having done stuff on my own for, the prior 10 years and everything, and, aced it. So, I mean, the barrier to entry, and that's a very common thread there, that, I mean, you get washed up bottle service girls, you get guys, old people that have no business probably, doing anything, related to contract law or finance. And, it just attracts a ton of people just because everybody sees HGTV or whatever, we open up a few doors, we make $1 million and it's, all easy peasy. And it's not. So, I mean, like, if you're doing what you need to be doing as a real estate agent, being that trusted fiduciary source, you're doing a lot more than open up doors. I mean, you're negotiating hard for the people. You should be an expert in contract law. You should be an expert in finances, mortgages, economics. I mean, you should have a broad background on a lot of different topics to be able to aid your people and be a value added. I mean, like, that's literally what got me into, basically my forward facing hat now for being a real estate agent. I was like, man, like, I know there's so many people out there that have gotten burned and had crappy agents. Everybody has a story with a bad real estate agent. I mean, it is, absolutely just neck and neck with used car salesmen. And, it's not without merit. Trying to find somebody in this day and age that's going to take care of you, one, and then also have the required knowledge, I believe, to operate in a professional capacity that you can do right by your clients, not just negotiate, but, be smart on, hey, does this house make sense? Does this mortgage make sense? Like I swear I'm probably one of the few realtors down here. I asked the other day because I caught something at closing. I was basically going through the spreadsheet and looking over the numbers for a client because he wasn't financially savvy, and ended up finding a mistake that was like $4,300 that was going to be left on the table and basically going back to the seller. And I was like, no, like, this is a VA loan. You can recapture this if he has like a car loan or a credit card, something that he has debt on. Like, we don't want $4,300 to basically go back to the seller, be free and clear. So I actually, funny enough story too, I actually got in trouble while I was up in Alaska when I first PCS'd up there because I was going around acting as my own agent. And I found a house that I submitted an offer into. And because it's legal for you to represent yourself as your own agent in all 50 states, just like you can be your own lawyer in all 50 states, it's not normally advised. But because I was, basically putting in my own offers and basically coming with my own finance, doing my own inspections, I went straight to the owners and basically submitted an offer to them for a property because I couldn't get in touch with the real estate agent because she was out golfing or doing whatever she wanted to do, just not being responsible to her client's needs. And she got so mad at me. She actually called my chain of command and complained because he's like, oh, he can't be out here writing his own contracts. He's acting as a realtor. He doesn't have a license. I'm like, what's illegal about that? You're mad because you didn't do your job and I went straight to the buyers with a contract and, I'm doing everything you're supposed to be doing. Like, how is that bad on me? So, I mean, I've had multiple different run-ins with realtors that get all worked up and everything because they're like, we're the best, we're the brightest, and we're doing this, we're doing that. And every day there's almost a new example of just realtors failing people, and it's just very very bad to say, but we are so just overrun with just people that probably shouldn't be in our chosen field, if you will. So, I mean, yeah, I've been buying and selling houses every PCS. I buy rentals. I basically, convert those into long-term rentals. I have a couple down in Oklahoma City. I basically do exclusive rentals for Canadians. So kind of like us, when we go to another country, they get paid very well for, rents and everything, as long as you provide a quality product. So I basically fully furnish all the homes, make sure they have a really nice place to come down to when they're flying on AWACS and everything and Tinker. And they pay probably 1.5–2% of the median rate and everything down there for rent. So I mean, it's a very lucrative business to be able to capitalize on that, but just something I kind of fell into, and it's just something I've been doing ever since. Now I'm down here in Florida. I'm trying to expand and get a couple more rentals and everything down here, and just trying to be a value added, man. I mean, just like you said, everybody has a bad story when it comes to real estate agents, and we're not all like that. So.
Yeah, I had one, and it is wild because the guy who represented me is a friend of mine, but so we were kind of talking to the side, and he's going to listen to this, so he's going to chuckle with the story. But when I was buying the house I'm in right now, I said, I'm going over there. And he was like, we don't, that's really, if people don't like that, I said, yeah, I don't care. You can't, like, I'm a free man. So like they had a wine room here. I'm actually in it. I converted it into my office. And when I was looking at the house, I was going through all the wine to see what there was the most of, so I could buy a bottle of wine and then negotiate the porch furniture, all the outdoor stuff.
Nice.
So I came and knocked on the door, and her agent flipped her lid over that I showed up without agents present. And so I was talking to mine about it, and he's just like he's known me for decades, but he's like, well, they get worried because loose lips, you can kill the deal. Like, what if there was something wrong and she tells you about it? And I was like, so what you're saying is the agent's so unethical, they'd rather me buy a house with a problem just so it closes, knowing that was a potential. They'd rather their client not disclose that, because it should have been on the disclosure sheet if there's a problem. So if she's going to be loose lips later and kill the deal, I mean, I'm glad I stopped by. That's pretty unethical to push it through so they don't screw it up for a problem. And he's like, well, that was probably a bad example, and I was like, well, it just makes it sound awful, dude.
Yeah. So the incentive is to get everybody to close. So yeah, regardless of ethics, everybody's trying to get everybody across the finish line. Unfortunately, somebody's interests are probably going to get compromised somewhere along the way. So I have my military retirement, I have like multiple streams of income and everything for rentals and stuff. So I'm comfortable, so I tell people that openly. I'm like, hey, like, I'm not hungry to get the next deal. Like, I'm hungry to get you a deal. Like, if we don't close, we can find another house. Like, that's not an issue to me. My issue is, you walking away, making sure, you get the most amount of money possible back, either through the negotiation process or not. And, you have somebody, that's experienced, not just in finance, but also walking through the house and being like, hey, like, that's an issue. That's an issue. This is, something I would be worried about if I was buying the house. So, I mean, being able to be that voice of reason and, pointing people on to, potential issues, that's definitely a value added, So, and a lot of agents won't do that. Like, a lot of agents will just stand there like statues. You walk in the house and they're like, oh, what do you think? And, they're like, oh, house looks great, and there's no input, they're basically just like chauffeuring people around, opening up doors and just hoping they don't say anything to kill the deal. And I'm like, that's not why we're here. Like, I don't want to sell you a crappy house, because if I do, it's going to come back on me. Like, if you're having issues with water heaters, you're having issues with dry rot, termites, water intrusion, floods, you name it. If I'm not doing my due diligence for you and I'm not identifying things that are potential issues for you, like, why am I here? Like, so I'm trying my best to correct the stigma of real estate agents, because, man, it is so hard. I mean, like, you talk to somebody for the first time and like they're automatically guards up, automatically think I'm like some kind of swindler, like I'm out to take like their firstborn kid, it's bad, man. So I think I've had like a pretty positive outreach and everything here so far. Like, I've been doing pretty good, man. So, I mean, like, obviously I've been doing this for like 10, 11 years. Only had my real estate license since April 1st. So that's coming up on 4 months. I'm already close to like $2 million in volume and everything. And I mean, like, we're in a down market. We're in dire straits down here in Florida. Nothing's moving. And, I'm like one of the few like new people down here that's like moving some big numbers and everything. And a lot of that has to do with me being upfront and open with people. I think to a degree, most real estate agents just aren't comfortable with, because they're scared of losing deals, or they're scared of talking about something they're not an expert at, and they're scared of being sued for bad information or whatever. So, I mean, that's basically how we're trained, is like, shut up, color, let your clients basically do all their due diligence on their own, and you just get everybody across to the finish line. And that's that's not an ethical way to do business in my mind. And it just really irks me. It got to the point where I was just like, somebody needs to do something about this. And, heck, like I got free time now and I have the experience. Let me try to, change some families' lives and some experiences and everything. There's definitely a market out there for, ethical, knowledgeable agents. And unfortunately, there's not that many out there. So.
And that's something that we should be looking out for right now, especially like you said, with the market kind of tightening up, and sellers are not coming down off the high prices that they've been used to the last couple of years. At the same time, rates are higher, and so buyers can't afford as much. There's kind of a gap in there, and a lot of things are just kind of sitting frozen. And so therefore, with a lot of real estate agents in the market that are vying for those deals, if the deals are fewer and far between, perhaps the bounds that you're willing to press, it's like I'll go a little bit further, across the unethical line in order to close this sale. Not all of them are going to do that, but it's something to certainly look out for. I think you said earlier that with a low barrier to entry, and people kind of feel like they're dealing with a used car salesman. But the other thing people think of when they think of low barrier to entry and these kind of tactics is insurance agents, and it's a well-deserved reputation. Because the life insurance license is same thing. You study for a week or a month and pass the exam and get your life license. And now it kind of the same way with real estate. You need to actually getting the license is the easy part. Getting represented with a brokerage and being able to have all the tracks in place to facilitate deals on our end. Getting the contracts with the companies that do it right and allow for the types of policies that we're trying to set our clients up with. That's the harder part, is getting the contract after you've got the license. But that low barrier to entry, that's why the education piece is so vitally important, in being willing to go in. When we're talking through the policy, we could illustrate, and a lot of people do, a policy that looks incredible and get people excited about numbers down the road, and then not include the education piece and just sign the policy and get paid. But we're almost autistic in our desire to make sure that they understand these mechanics of the policy, where it's like, okay, yes, this looks good. Yes, I understand you're excited and you want to move forward, but please, I need you to understand what the implications are here. If you pull this lever, this is going to happen. How the components of your premium play into each other, how they're different, how they're the same. Like, we really want that education piece to be there, because we don't want to just set someone up with a policy that, even though it is good, if they don't understand it and they don't understand what they're getting. I feel like our clients and the IBC community in general are the ones that understand their policies very well. And I think that we should take that same approach to real estate. We should understand, if you're buying a home, you should understand the structure of your mortgage. You should know what it means when we say front loaded interest. And people just don't get that going through the process because it's not required. There's not an expectation of that education piece. It's more like, yeah, we love these fixtures on the countertops or whatever, and we like the square footage. We like features of the house. The house is of course more important to you than the mortgage note. But the mortgage note's what's actually the power behind this whole thing. That's how you get into the house. And so you get to kind of put your foot in the door with a down payment. And now you've assumed this enormous obligation, likely the largest financial obligation in your life at that period of time. And we just don't even understand that. And I think that your approach of teaching people that, and being an expert in not just, here's the price per square foot, and this neighborhood's going up, and this is a great place to live, and this has the new granite countertops, whatever, like actually trying to convey the mechanics of the mortgage is super valuable too.
And that's probably like the biggest thing, ironically, I spend my time on, is actually teaching people finance and mortgage stuff, even though like I'm not a licensed mortgage broker or anything. Like the vast majority of my time, like for example, I just closed on 2 houses this week, closed on one on Monday and one on Tuesday. Both were phenomenal deals. Tuesday, I got a client $105,000 off of a $700,000 house, just to give you kind of where the market is down here in Florida right now. So there's definitely deals to be had. If somebody's wanting to stare down another agent and throw a haymaker. But yeah, the mortgage, even though I was able to save like $105,000 off the price, because I went mortgage shopping with this guy and taught him the mechanics of how the mortgages work, basically the truth in lending sheets, basically how everything is basically broken down from all the different block A, block B, all the different fees and everything. Like, he came to me with a pre-approved lender for like 7.2% or something outrageous for a VA. We got him down to like a 5.75, no fees, no points, no nothing, block A. And he was walking away. I don't even know like the number off the top of my head, but I think it was somewhere about $250,000. We saved him over the 30-year loan interest just by doing our due diligence and basically talking him through and educating him on, what was going in, like what all these different fees were, what was negotiable, what wasn't. And like you said, the mechanics of the mortgage and all the different things and options that he had available to him. I mean, he had a conventional loan available to him. He had a VA loan available to him. There's FHA options. I mean, there's a whole slew of different things that you can do to finance and, buy a home. But a lot of people don't realize what goes into every one of those different programs. What's the pros, what's the cons, and how much is it ultimately costing you at the tail end. So, I mean, everybody likes to look at the short-term, benefits of certain programs and this and that. But, at the end, nobody's hardly ever looking at the opportunity cost or the actual lump sum cost of that actual loan and how much it's going to cost you. So, I mean, yeah, the mortgage piece is a huge underrated portion of that, because that's where you're saving all of your money at. It's the finance portion. Yeah, you can save a little bit on the negotiation on the sales price, but if you're not financially sound and you can't speak to what's going on with the finance numbers, like, you're lost. I'm sure it's the same thing, with life insurance and everything else. If you're not up on the actual process and how the sausage is made, I mean, like, you don't know what you're eating.
Like you're saying that the banker makes the money.
Yeah. And dude, you're seeing that even with like assumable VA loans and everything right now. They're making it so hard for people to do assumable VA loans that we have anywhere from like a 3 to 9 month waiting period from the banks, because so they're making it almost impossible for people to assume VAs. If they can drag their feet somewhere in that 3 to 9 month period, the deal will hopefully fall apart due to the time it's taking, and they'll just refinance out. They'll basically buy like a new loan, basically take advantage of the great, 6-7% interest rates we have right now versus the 2 or the 3 that's on their books. But it's a money making business. Like, they are 100% screwing over the investor, to make a dollar and get like the bad loans, that are 2 and 3% off their books, because it's a negative equity deal for them. I mean, the banker's always wanting to win.
Real quick on that, because this is actually why we started messaging initially, is because, I mean, we've been messaging back and forth, for on various things for like 2 years now. But recently I had some friends that were moving. He just separated or he got medically retired from the SEALs. They're moving up to Montana. They have a home here in San Diego, and they have like a 2.25% VA loan. Right. And so their realtors pushing them to use a VA assumable loan. And so my first thought was, well, if someone is able to assume that loan, their willingness to go, like, there's going to be a line out the door if you can get a 2.25% in San Diego right now. And so you're going to expand the pool of people that are eligible for this and that could actually afford your asking price, if a large chunk of it is going to be at 2.25 and the remainder. So I was like, yeah, I'm not a real estate guy. I'm going to message Gregg and ask him. But to me, it makes sense that you would allow people to make VA assumable loans, because why would you not want to broaden the pool of people that could apply and create more competition? If you can create a line out the door, a bidding war, like, that's best case scenario, right, as a seller. And so I messaged you and I said, hey, am I missing anything here? And of course I was missing a lot. And that's this piece right here. So for people that don't know, we don't want to spend too much time for a non-military audience, but what is a VA assumable loan, so that people that are not familiar with that kind of understand like why the banks want to delay that?
Yeah, so VA assumable loan, it's basically just a loan program for people that have served and everything. We usually get about a 0.75% interest rate cut over a regular conventional loan. Just gives a couple of different favorable deals for service members. There's the appraisal contingency and everything at the beginning. There's also a couple of different deals where the house has to be up to certain codes and inspection standards.
No PMI.
Yeah, no PMI is another huge one. So there's a lot of things like baked into, the VA loan program that are positives and everything. But yeah, if you can make it assumable, the thought was, this is great. It's going to help out another service member and everything. But unfortunately, the banks that sat there ran away with that. And now that interest rates are 6-7%, they're trying their hardest to get these negative equity loans off their books, because it doesn't behoove them to keep losing money on them. So we're going to make it harder on the consumer and assume those in hopes that, they're going to be forced to refinance, or somebody's going to have to buy the house under a new VA loan at the current interest rates. And we're going to lose that 2% loan, thankfully, and get it off our books. Everything they're doing is obviously for profit. At the ultimate end of the day, it's not the VA organization that's signing off on the assumable loan. It's the actual bank that's holding it. That's the bottleneck. So it's the lenders, the bank themselves that are, basically holding everybody hostage with the process now.
The bank is not your friend ever.
No.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I don't even know how I didn't even think through that element of it when I was giving them, my perspective on it, which was obviously not a fully fleshed out perspective, but it makes sense if they're sitting on, if every new loan is generating 7% and they have a loan currently that's generating 2%. Well, when a new buyer makes an offer, takes out a new mortgage, that company that had the 2% loan, to them, we think of the loan, they think of it as an asset. This is an asset generating 2% interest. Well, that gets paid off in full. And now that one's off the books so that we can use that money to get a 7% loan. And so that new loan erases the old one. And now either they get paid off or they get paid off and issue a new one at 7%. So that definitely makes a lot of sense there. What other market trends have you noticed? And then also, can you hit on the NAR lawsuit, what that was? Because that was in the news, but I think a lot of people don't fully understand like some of the impacts there or what actually happened. How does that change your business and some of the fallout on there, things that people should be looking out for?
Yeah, so market trends and everything. So it's hyper local and everything everywhere nationally right now. So Florida obviously is in the news for, having a buyer's market. The further south you go in Florida, the worse it gets. So I mean, Miami's really bad, Tampa, on the bad side and everything is as far as having decreasing values just due to inventory, high interest rates. I mean, I think right now, like nationally, it's like 55% of mortgage applications are getting denied right now. So you have at least half of the mortgage applications, the whole country, getting denied because people can't, afford the payment with the interest rates the way they are, and because of the current prices. So thankfully, Pensacola and the Panhandle is like probably one of the best markets in Florida right now. And we're pretty much just stagflation. It's pretty neutral. Like, we're not losing a whole lot of value in our homes, but we're also not appreciating either. So, I mean, it's kind of just hanging out. I think my house is down like $10,000 since I bought it like a year and a half, 2 years ago. So, I mean, you're not really making any money on real estate, but we also have a pretty interesting kind of transient inventory issue down here in Florida too. So at least in Pensacola, last year we ended up having like 5,600 permits for like new housing and everything. So obviously there was a ramp up with housing and people trying to churn stuff out during COVID and everything. This is kind of the tail end of that. Now this year, I think it's slated to be somewhere around 1,500 or 1,600 permits by end of the year for new housing. And the new builders are just basically giving away houses down here with sales concessions, promo interest rates. I mean, just anything they can do to get these houses out the door because nobody's able to qualify or buy. And that's driving a lot of pain into the rest of the market because people that are reselling can't even compete with these new builds, even though the new builds are on the crappier side as far as, everybody is trying to make a buck. I mean, their profit margins are razor thin right now, if at all. So, I mean, like, they're using subpar products, cheap lumber, cheap labor. I mean, anything they could do to build a house now for a profit, they're just not built well. So, I mean, but people can't compete with the numbers that, you can get into a new house if they're trying to resell. And that's an issue. So, I mean, it's just putting a constraint on the market as a whole. We're kind of in a situation right now where sellers and buyers, it's whoever blinks first is going to lose the battle, if you will. So I've almost dealt exclusively with buyers since starting just because they have the power right now. So listings are sitting at a median for roughly about 75 days down here in Pensacola. So it's a little bit worse the further south you go in Florida and everything. But I mean, median, you're talking approaching 3 months. And the rest of the country, depending on where they're at, there's different varying levels of that. But by and large, I think we're, either at a neutral market or we're, venturing further into a buyer's market and not where you're at in the country and everything. So that's what I'm seeing, just backup of inventory and not being able to sell because people can't qualify for the mortgages. And it just doesn't make sense. I mean, you got, 3-4 years of pent up demand of people that are like, oh, we're going to wait for 3%. We're going to wait for 4%. But what happens when it goes down that low, everybody's going to be able to qualify again. And it's going to be much worse than 2020 all over again. Like you're going to have people that are going to be fist fighting out in front of houses when and if those interest rates come down. And, the best time to buy would be right now where, you can get a killer deal because nothing's moving. So, I mean, if you're wanting to buy anything or get into anything, do it now before the interest rates potentially come down because, I mean, it's just, you're losing out on time equity, but then you'd also don't want to have to fight like 4 or 5 people again, and put in a contingent offer with no inspections or anything to even, get any kind of traction or shot at a house. So that's been interesting down here because Florida's been its own little, because we had so many people come in over COVID and everything and just buy up everything. It was super hot markets for forever. Yeah, now it's just static. I mean, like there's not really a whole lot of movement pushing the needle one way or another. And then, like you said with the NAR lawsuit, I mean, that's been a huge headache and everything for us. People already don't understand, how commissions and realtors and contract law and stuff kind of works. And then you throw in, a huge headline like that, and like, oh, sellers no longer have to, offer buyer's commission, or, oh, they don't have to do anything anymore. We're not responsible for paying agents. And yeah, that's partially true, but that's not really the whole truth to it. So what happened was, NAR ended up smacked down. So we can no longer advertise commissions on our MLS. So basically, for those that don't know, MLS is more or less like a monopoly, if you will, what Zillow publicly is. So when you're a realtor, you sign up, you get hit for a lot of fees, and we're required by the North American Association of Realtors to list our properties within so-and-so days and comply with their demands more or less for listing and stuff like that. So we're no longer allowed to basically have like a caption or, anything on our private listings that only agents can look at and search and, send stuff out of what we're basically offering as far as commissions. And, now because it's basically been said that, realtors as a whole are more or less a monopoly, thanks to NAR, which, I pretty much agree. I mean, like, our business model, it needs a radical change in my mind. And if that costs me money, so be it. I personally don't like the way that, stuff is kind of set up and everything right now. That's a personal opinion, but there are changes happening. So for us now, as far as commission, historically it was like what, 3% on either side. Seller gets 3% for their agent, buyer gets 3% from, the seller's whole to basically cover their fees. Now the seller is not required or, anything to basically put any commission out there. So if the seller wanted to pay their agent 3% to list the house and then list the house with nothing going to the buyer's agent, what that does is it makes whoever goes to look at that house, if they are using an agent, it makes them liable to pay out of their own pocket now to their own agent to do the work. Basically, the lawsuit made it harder for buyers and for the end user. It just puts them in a worse position, honestly. I mean, like, I feel like it's worse than it was in the beginning, even though the beginning wasn't even that great regardless. So now, like, we're having to confuse people and be like, oh, yeah, the seller's going to pay your commission, but, if they don't pay all of it, now you're going to be liable for the gap between what they pay and what I normally charge. And it short circuits everybody's brain. And they're like, oh, this guy's trying to take advantage of me. Oh, I'm going to be liable for something. I'm going to have to pay for something. More or less like what I do personally is I tell everybody that comes to me, I'm like, hey, here's what happened with the NAR lawsuit. My goal for you is to be an asset, a knowledge-driven asset, but at the same time, I don't want to cost you anything extra out of your pocket for what I'm doing. So if the seller is only offering, 2% or 2.5%, I'm going to focus on your sell price first and foremost, because I mean, the seller only has so much of a profit margin and everything on his house between his own fees, closing costs, and, funding his own agents and everything, and then having to pay commission for somebody to come in and bring your buyer's agent. I'd much rather have, that money come off the sale price and help the seller than, basically, oh, I'm going to hold out for, 3% or this deal isn't happening. You see that all the time where guys are like, oh, I'm too good for, 2% or 2.5%. And you're just like, what? Like you would squash a whole deal over like $1,000? Like what? Why? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why aren't you trying to help them, save money? There's just so many things that go into that, dude. And it ruffles my feathers because like, I don't know, like I've had it out with multiple agents and everything, with the whole commission deal. And yeah, you'd be surprised like what agents will say like behind the scenes or, to keep commissions up or, keep the bread flowing. And I mean, it doesn't make sense for the end user for a lot of these guys that are off the streets and everything. When a seller says, oh, hey, like I don't have to, pay anything commission wise for an agent anymore. I'm going to put out 0% or I'm not going to advertise it. It's illegal for us to steer. Like we can't steer people to certain homes based on commission or, this, that, and the other, but you see it every day. Like if, I don't know, like an agent's offering 0% commission, I know there are tons of agents out there that aren't going to show that house, because it's going to affect their bottom line. And then what's going to happen is they're going to have to make a offer, to basically try to cover their expenses. That's going to basically come out of money that could have gone to the buyer. In the end, the consumer loses no matter what. So I think the biggest thing has just been the confusion and everything as far as the NAR lawsuit.
I actually want to challenge that a little bit of that, because I
Yeah.
thought something through. The buyer always paid the commission, but it was the lack of transparency makes it look like the seller paid the commission. But as a seller of a home, I am 100% considering what is being paid in commissions in my price. So I'm adding to that. The difference is, in my opinion, is that it was wrapped up into a loan. And after NAR, if I offered 0% commission, what they can't do is wrap it up into a loan unless they come out and negotiate that afterwards. So it feels like to the buyer, they have to pay it out of pocket. They always did. So that's my thing, is the sellers have never paid a commission on a house. That's just the way the transaction shows on the left and right side of the column. But the buyer's paying for that because it's rolled into the buyer's loan.
The buyer brings it all to the table.
They've always paid the commission. It just happens to look like it goes here and comes out on this side. But like, I had a bottom line. I will not sell this house for less than this amount because I'm considering 6%. I'm reducing that from the final sale price, and that's my bottom line. I won't go below that number, like period dot, unless the market just crashes and I have to move it and take the loss. So the buyer was always paying it in a non-transparent way, in my opinion. So, and because that's what everybody's accustomed to. We're all kind of like brainwashing them into it being that they now feel like I shouldn't have to pay this. Well, you always have.
100%, man. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, I mean, everything's wrapped up into that bottom line. So, I mean, if you're a seller's agent, your 3% or 2% or whatever you work out with the buyer is going to come out of that sale price. So the seller's going to have to account for that. And, they're going to artificially inflate up their numbers to offset that commission and everything on your side. But the seller is also the one that is historically and still kind of setting the precedent, like, yeah, I'm going to give you 3%, but then I'm also offering 2%, to the buyer's agent, whoever comes over here. So then whatever you guys want to do and work out, that's on you.
What a lot of people don't know, and I think this is what you probably can, I want to get into like how you can help people working in 50 states from a distance. You can help somebody in Washington State from Florida. And I want to talk about like how you do that and what you can do for them. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is the entire thing as the buyer or the seller is negotiable with the agents. The agents have gotten so accustomed to saying, well, this is what we take. And it's just like, well, that's not what I pay. You've always had that opportunity to sit at the table and say, we're going to negotiate this. And as a matter of fact, like, I could say most agents probably wouldn't take this, but like, I'm walking away with $300,000 minimum after this. So if you can't get my house sold for what the commission you want, your commission drops all the way down, and it could be zero. If that means we only get 300, and that's what I walk away with and put in my pocket. People don't realize like you could negotiate that. That would be a tough one to sell with most agents, but all of that is negotiable. And to the fact of like what you did, where you studied the whole process, so you didn't need a buyer's agent, like you talked about in the beginning of this podcast. If you are savvy, understand the contract law and what you're doing, you can negotiate easily without a buyer's agent, because you can take that 6% they want to do and say, hey, I want to give 1% back, 1% down on the price. You get to keep 4 as the seller's agent. So you can take those other 2%, and if the seller's agent's willing, really work yourself a great deal, but you better be a little savvy to do it.
Yeah. So just to clarify on that, because like if you're not licensed, you can't earn a commission. But what you can do is, just like you said, you can offset the money. So it's not coming to you, but you can definitely give an offer that's 3% less than, what it currently is listed at. And that's always like, when I was buying, not being licensed and everything, like that's always what I did. I automatically in my head, I was like, okay, well, if it's a for sale by owner, he probably already has at least 3 to 6% kind of baked into the price that I can already negotiate down before I even start talking about numbers. Same thing with an agent and everything. They have it wrapped up. And here's what a lot of people don't realize too. And so if you have a seller's agent and you don't have a buyer's agent, a lot of agents now, they're accounting for that full 6%. But if they don't have an agent on the buyer's side now, there's contracts in place to where they can basically claim the full 6% if there's not another agent. And most agents won't disclose, kind of what their agreement is because it's not going to behoove them, in the negotiation standpoint. But I mean, like it's all stuff I wish I would have known, earlier on. And I wish more agents would be more transparent about, because like, I mean, the more you dive into the specifics on how we do stuff, it's just like, man, like this is really shady, So, I mean, it's like, man, like this is, just propping up like the appreciation on houses just because you're baking in all this money, for commission and everything every time the house rolls over to a new hand. So
when my mother passed away and we sold her house, this ate me up. And this is what we'll let you tell what your kind of tagline is, but this is one of the reasons I had a really bad taste in my mouth for real estate agents. Is the same friend of mine represented me. He was awesome, ethical, phenomenal dude. And they asked for seller's assist. And the buyer's agent got mad at him for not including that in the commissionable price, because he was just like, no, he's helping your client. Like, we settled at this, and they came back and asked for another, 5-6K, whatever it was, for seller's assist. Like, that's not part of the sale price. That's you're telling me that my client should make less money to help yours.
Yeah.
I guess the buyer's agent was like flipping mad at him, and he was just like, that's like unethical. So, the next time I did a deal, I approached it with that, like, I'm unwilling to pay it. Like, that's a deal breaker. The sale's over if somebody tries to, if somebody comes to me with a seller's assist request, like, that's not commissionable.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. So, I mean, I've even lowered, like, if you get an impasse of, a couple $1,000s or something, and like, oh, like seller's bottom line, like they have to have this to sell the house. And the buyer's like, hey, I'm only pre-qualified for this. Like, I don't have it in my bank account. Like, I mean, I've lowered my commission in the past to bridge that deal to help out military families in the past. I mean, because why not? I mean, like it's still a deal. You're still making money. You're helping them out, getting them into a home. And then you're also, not having to go through the whole process of trying to find 20, 30 homes and, go look through again. So, I mean, how much is your time worth on the end as well? So, I mean, if I can wrap up a sale and, you think you got a great price and I was able to make that happen because I took a little bit less out of my commission, why not? So, I mean, if it helps the family, especially if it's a military family, we all know, like, I mean, military families are not the wealthiest clients out there and everything, and people live paycheck to paycheck. So, if you can do something, try to help facilitate a deal for those guys, why not? So, I mean, but you'll get, agents that are like hard pass, like, I'm making 3% on every deal I do. And, I'm out to buy a new yacht this year. It is what it is, so who you choose to do business with, definitely, it matters. So.
You said something important earlier. You said, this is all stuff I wish I would have known. My big takeaway from everything you've said is that there is a lot of things to talk through and learn when you're going into a home purchase. We'll stick with the buyer side. When you're going into a home purchase, there's a lot that you need to talk about and learn that has nothing to do with any individual house you see. Analogous to the way that we present infinite banking, we talk through all of these concepts. We try to break down what is cash value, how does it grow, what is premium structure. We do basically an introductory call where we never once talk about the specific policy that makes sense for you without talking about any numbers that we might move towards in structuring your specific policy. If you're going to buy a home, before you're walking in, and even before you get on Zillow, you need to have a conversation with Gregg or someone like him who is able to say, here's what we need to think about. What is your actual, your maximum price here? Let's talk through how the commission side of it pays out and how that's going to interact with your mortgage and the final numbers here on the disclosure. Let's talk through the dynamics in this market. There's so much to learn, and there's so much that should be talked about before we ever walk into a house with an intention to buy. That education piece is huge. And when I was in grad school, our equivalent at Kennedy School of a thesis, I did a project for the Central Bank of Ireland. They charter a research project basically. And so my quote thesis was on mortgage disclosures, and it was on improving mortgage disclosures for consumer protection. And so I spent my entire time there basically trying to improve the 5-page mandatory disclosure in the Irish mortgage market, but I used the US market because they're basically identical. And so I did a very, very deep dive into the mechanics of a mortgage and how can you take these complicated aspects of it and make it presentable so that someone who doesn't have a big financial background could look through these and understand some of these concepts, specifically front-loaded interest and how that works. Now, when we move that to the conversation we have about infinite banking, we make an analogy about the way that our cash value grows. We often make an analogy of the mortgage between monthly mortgage payment and how that is amortized across principal and interest. And then also when we're talking about a PUA payment, how that's more analogous to a principal only payment. That's an analogy that's pretty common because it helps a lot of people understand what we're trying to convey in life insurance discussion. But the amount of times that I've had a conversation like that where I say, okay, you have a mortgage, right? Because we're looking at your overall asset picture here. You have a mortgage, right? So you understand how front-loaded interest works. And then you get a kind of a blank stare. And it's like, well, you have an $800,000 loan against your primary residence. You should know how front-loaded interest works. Even if you can't explain it in detail, you should understand why after 1 year you have basically no principal, no equity in the home apart from any appreciation. If you don't understand that, then the person that you worked with didn't take the time to educate you on how those dynamics work. And a lot of what I studied for that thesis was the turnover rate, the average time that people sell a house. And so how much equity they're actually generating from the average amount of mortgage payments that they pay before they sell the house. It's so front loaded that you need to think a lot about how long you're going to be in this house, because that's going to very much sway whether you should be buying this house, whether home ownership and the idea of like, I'm not going to rent because I don't want to pay someone else's mortgage. It's like, okay, well, for the first year, you're basically just paying down the closing costs and beyond that. And so if you don't understand what I just said there, your real estate agent didn't walk through the mechanics of a mortgage with you. And I think that's super important that we should all be able to understand that. But while we try to get our clients to where the asset that they understand the most is their life insurance policy that they could explain to someone else, that is, you could go an entire working career not understanding what a 401k is or why you have it. You just know that you started doing it as soon as you got to the company. You just know you started doing the TSP. You don't really know much about it. You could talk for 20 seconds and exhaust your knowledge on these things. We fall into these things, and same thing with home ownership. People just buy a home. Here's my monthly cost. This is what it costs me. That's not what it costs you for the home. That's what it costs you for the home and a lot of other things. And so can you explain that? I think that the way that you approach it, which is I'm your advocate and I want you to understand these things, is the way that it should be done. But as we've said here, that's rare. And that gets into your tagline. If you can kind of elaborate, I don't want to butcher it. So if you can give us your tagline, because I think it's really good. I think a lot of people will resonate.
Yeah, no, I've sat there and joked literally for years about that. I'm like, hey, like if I was ever a realtor, like I'd be a realtor for people who hate realtors. So, I mean, like that's, I hate realtors, and I am one now. So I mean, like, I wake up hating myself. But no, I mean, like we talked about, like the barrier to entry is just so low, and the knowledge base by and large. I mean, there's some great agents out there. I mean, like there are some phenomenally great agents that are full service agents that walk through finance pieces. Can talk intelligently about how the appraisal process go and what that means for you. Can help with inspections. I mean, there's great people out there. So I don't want to say every realtor and everything out there, every real estate agent is like a bad person, because they're not. But I will say that, in my experience, the vast majority have been less than, what I would want to see them as. So I think we need to do better and hold ourselves accountable as a job and a career to a higher standard. And I ironically, that's what the North American Association of Realtors, tries to do. But I think that, it's just like a printing press at this point. Like there's new agents minted every single day, like clockwork. It's like a machine churning these guys out, because everybody watches an episode of HGTV and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my TV show one day and I'm going to, walk into $1 million without doing anything or knowing anything. And I mean, it's like we do a really bad job of talking about all the glamorous stuff, but then not doing our due diligence as far as, being knowledgeable advocates for our clients. And at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to. It's like, I think the people that make the best agents are the ones that ultimately are empathetic and want to help their clients from a knowledge standpoint the best. So, I mean, like that's ultimately why I'm here. I post it all over my social media all the time. I'm like, I'm here to get great deals, because I love the thrill of negotiating. I mean, like this is like my gambler's high. If I like step into a ring with another agent and I'm throwing out ridiculous offers and I'm trying to get them to bite on it, like that's what gets me up in the morning. But at the same time, like if I'm able to help somebody, not just with the sell price, also with understanding finance or understanding basically what's going into the loan, or give them that financial education, like, oh, hey, like, you can structure this loan to do this in so-and-so years, with the tax implications, you can flip this into a 1031, or you can basically use, the VA loan over and over again, accrue, move around as a primary residence, accrue rentals in a certain specific spot. I mean, so there's a lot of financial education that can be imparted onto people, especially veterans, because I mean, the VA loan is like the biggest packed of wealth I've ever seen. I mean, and the fact that more people don't use it, it's, I think part of it is we're just not educated on just, the specifics of it and what we can actually do with it. And a lot of people are told lies about it from uneducated people that are, like, heck, I had to talk to a client yesterday because they're like, oh, I sat in a class and they told me like anytime I was going to buy a new house, I'd had to, refinance my old VA loan into a conventional. And then I'd have to get like a COE, certified certificate of eligibility, to go use the VA loan again. And I'm like, no, like who told you that? And they're like, oh, well, it was a financial advisor and it was a realtor. And, I was just like, no, just don't listen to any of that. That's 100% false. You can totally use a VA loan more than once. There's a set limit there based on your zip code, based on what you can use as far as entitlement for 0% down. But, even outside of that, like there's no loan limit for the VA loan. The financial piece is definitely something that is missing, not just with veterans and VA loan products and stuff like that, but as a whole across the real estate market. And I think a few get it right, but by and large, a lot of people don't. So, and I think that's another vetting factor for people that are looking for a real estate agent. Find somebody that is full service, that can intelligently talk about not just CMAs or, the price and the market and everything locally, but they can talk you through that financial portion. They can talk you through inspection. They've had some kind of, rental history or, buying and selling their own selves and, basically inspecting their own properties. And they know what to look for. They have trade knowledge, whether or not they're a plumber, electrician, welder, construction worker, something like that, where they have other experience outside of just the sales transaction portion. So there's a lot of different factors that can go into a real estate agent, and not just who pays for the most Google ads or the most Zillow ads or whatever else, that you see it all the time. I mean, like there's tons of people that'll pay out tens of thousands of dollars a month in Google ads or Zillow ads, and you're not even getting that person, so all this sales volume is going to these teams that are advertising that they're doing, this, that, and the other. But when you show up to that team, they're pawning it off on the new agent that they just got. And they're like, oh yeah, this would be a great transaction for you to cut your teeth on, and you're just like, what? You sold me on Superman, but then I get like Clark Kent over here that's, brand new to the struggle. And, what are you doing? This isn't what I signed up for. Be very careful because, just like mortgages, and God, mortgage guys are almost the worst. Like I'd say those guys are worse than, freaking real estate agents by and large. I mean, like just the way they manipulate the numbers, and people just aren't financially enough, savvy enough to catch it a lot of the time. So, I mean, they'll hide fees in different blocks and try to, I don't know, run down taxes or, reallocate funds into different deals. They'll call them doc fees. They'll call them lender fees. They'll call them origination fees, whatever else, hide fees or try to tell consumers that they have to pay this stuff. And half of my battle is literally just fighting with a loan officer and be like, no, like, my client knows that everything in block A is negotiable. He doesn't want anything in block A. He wants no origination fees. He wants no lender fees. He wants no points. So I'm sure you guys can talk intelligently about, points and the pros and cons of that, obviously, but there's definitely a educational battle there along with the financial battle when you're going through with clients. So, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, having somebody that is financially savvy that can speak to the numbers and the processes, it's not just about who's, has the most sales or who has the, the prettiest Facebook page or X, Y, and Z, because I mean, there are tons of people out there that are crushing sales and crushing numbers, just running through transactions, but they're not doing their due diligence, I'd argue, and doing what's best for their clients. Hey, a race to a commission cap, and that's it.
Be really killer if you can get that kind of marketing and be a good, thorough, ethical agent. But everything you were saying there, I have two questions for you, and that kind of led into, well, I was going to ask it last, but that led into one of them. If you had an elevator with somebody, a buyer, and they said, what are the top 3 questions I should ask my agent? And then do seller, to make sure that I'm vetting a person well. Just what are the top 3 things that I want to dig into real quick? Like, do you A, B, C?
Obviously, experience. I mean, like the number of years you've been in the game. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody new or whatever can't be a great agent for you, but you run across a lot of unique situations. You'll see weird things that close, and you'll see weird things pop up on appraisals. You'll see weird things in inspections. So, I mean, I'd still say, regardless, number of years and everything that you've been in real estate is going to be your biggest contributing factor. Ask them honestly, point blank, how much financial training have you had? Like, what's your college background? What is your educational standards? Like, what do you bring to the table other than having a lockbox key and, just getting me into the house? Like, what can you provide me as an agent that is a value added? Can you help me shop for rates? Can you help me decipher inspections? There's a lot of agents that won't do that because they're like, oh, well, I'm not licensed as a loan officer. I could get sued if I tell somebody there's something wrong. Yeah, you could be sued, if you talk about something you're not educated on, give somebody like bad advice or something. But I mean, a lot of the stuff we talk about every day with clients, it's stuff you should be educated on. You should take the initiative to be educated, not just for yourself so you don't get sued, but so you can be an asset for who you're working for. That should be common sense. So yeah, so years in, what kind of financial background you have and like what kind of education you came from, like what was your prior career, where'd you come from? And why are you in real estate? What is your determining factor? Like, you just want to buy a boat? Do you want to be on HGTV? Or do you want to actually help somebody? I'm sure there'll be tons of people that'll be like, oh yeah, I do it for the families. But how many people actually can say that and back that up? I mean, like, I tell people all the time, not to gloat or anything, but like, if I don't make a sale, I'm not going to go hungry. Like, I have a retirement. I have multiple streams and multiple rentals and everything. Like, I'm not going to force a bad sale just to make some coin here, and how many people can actually say that? So find somebody that is not hinging their whole entire existence from eating beans to, going to steak the next day based on your transaction. Again, you can probably point out, the people that are doing pretty well in real estate and everything. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a great agent. It might just mean they have great advertising, but it does kind of give them a little bit of leeway to where, oh, I'm not going to tell you this house is great, because fuck, I haven't had a sale in 6 months. I need to pay my car loan. I need to pay my mortgage, So, I mean, you get a lot of those contributing factors and everything into finding a good agent. Find somebody that actually knows what fiduciary duties are. We all get trained on that, but we don't necessarily know the ramifications. I believe the new kids don't, on what fiduciary duties actually encompass and how we are devoted to our clients and doing what's best for them financially and legally. That's a huge, huge piece too. So yeah, I'd say time in, background, education requirements, financial knowledge and stuff like that. And then finding somebody that's going to, why are you in real estate? What is your driving factor or purpose for being here today? So,
earlier you mentioned the client where it sounded like the deal was ready to go, but you found $105,000 that wasn't necessary for him to finance. And so I would imagine that cut into what you earned on that deal. And I would also imagine that client would have bought the house without you finding that $105,000. So maybe there's a situation where you had the choice. Fiduciary duty, it's not like a fully definable thing in a lot of cases. If he's ready to close the deal and you've got the agreed on price, you could have moved forward with it. But when you find where you could save him $100,000, that's going to cut into your check at the end of the day. And that's important to note that, for as a buyer, that's important to note that the incentive structure here is, your incentive purely, if we remove everything you're talking about, your incentive structure is the highest possible closing price as both the buyer and the seller. That's how you're incentivized. But you have to go beyond that and try to drive down that price for your buyer or your buying clients by saving that client $105,000. That cut into what you made, but that's ultimately for the client. I know Brian had one more question. I'm imagining it's the same question I have.
My question was, so what would the realtor who hates realtors do to help somebody in Pennsylvania? Like, how can your service be used for people around the country? Like, you talked a lot about local deals you do, but you also said you work in 50 states. Like, why would somebody come to you? And what do you do for that person at a distance?
My question was the same, but it was like, I'm moving to New Hampshire most likely in a year, maybe a year and a half. And if a listener is like, hey, Gregg sounds awesome. If I'm ever in Pensacola, that's great. I'm definitely going to work with him because I want this kind of service and understanding, but this doesn't really help me because I just got to go on to Redfin and find whoever's on, when I sign up to look at the house, like the first person I interact with. So same question.
How are you going to help on?
How are you going to help me?
Just legal disclaimer, I can't work in all 50 states. So I'm waiting on Alabama to basically stamp my license for me to be legal to basically operate over there. I'm licensed in Florida. But what a lot of people don't realize is that agents can actually make money off you by referring you to other agents, basically as, a lead in other states and everything. So if you're moving to another another state, if you have a network pre-built or if you know somebody good or something, you can refer that person. Typically, it's around 25%. So you give or take, depending on the professional relationship and what kind of client it is, if somebody's pre-approved, if they're moving there, if it's a cold lead or whatever, you can come to a negotiation, between broker to broker and be like, hey, this lead is worth 25%. But for a lot of agents, that ends there. So you'll ship somebody off, military couple, say, hey, I'm moving to Clovis, New Mexico. I literally talked to one of the agents over there this morning. I'm doing something similar. Guy helped out, again, one of the guys over in the chat and everything, basically find a realtor over there. But what I do is take it a step beyond that. So not only am I going to refer you to somebody, I'm going to vet people. So I'm not going to just hand you off to somebody that I wouldn't feel comfortable, putting my name on the line with. So normally what I do is somebody that comes to me, specifically military guys, are like, oh, hey, do you have connections X, Y, and Z base? A lot of times I do, but if I don't, one of the big things that I do is I'll pull up a Google sheet of 20, 30 different top realtors based on volume or sales in the area. And I'll literally just start calling brokerages, be like, hey, let me talk to your actual broker. Let me talk to your head salesperson. Let me talk to whoever's going to handle this file. And I'll start grilling them, dude. I'll start, asking them contract law questions about what they have going on up there. If it's an attorney state, if it's a title company state, all the different parameters that are going to go into that transaction. So I'll sit down and actually have a job interview and, out of say 20, 30 people, and have a top, 2 or 3, and usually call back and be like, hey, made it to the final cut. What can you, tell me to help me, push it across the finish line here? What would you do for the client that's going to be head and shoulders above these other 2 guys? And, I'll basically, just go back and forth. And normally it's a gut feeling, once you talk to so many different people, you kind of can wade through the chaff, if you will, and everything of, who's going to be good and who's going to be bad. I provide the service to basically take that weight off of people's shoulders because, if you click on Zillow, it's just going to attach you to whoever, randomly picks up the phone because that's how Zillow leads work. Whoever pays for the leads or pays for the ad space for that zip code, whenever you click on the button, it's going to attach you to whoever buyer agent, X, Y, and Z. It could be a guy with no experience or whatever. They just happen to have a Zillow lead, account and have the funds to pay for the ads. You're hooked up with him. You don't even know if he's good or not. So he's licensed. He's a realtor. He's certified, but is he? So getting a good agent wherever you're going, having somebody that's able to talk the talk and actually vet those guys so that you're not getting the salesman attitude. Because if you're not a realtor and you haven't been in the game, it's very easy, just like talking to a mortgage loan officer, it's very easy to get confused and be like, he sounds great. He's giving me the salesman's pitch. He's selling himself just like everybody else, so it's very easy for salesman type people to come across and get those leads. But what's actually of substance behind, that initial contact and everything? Is he going to do right by you? Is he going to be knowledgeable? How many years has it been at this? How many transactions does he have? Can you tell me the difference between transactions and volume? What is this person actually doing? So, vetting those people for people that are not in the know, it's much easier for me to do that than it probably is for the normal person off the street. So you could probably talk circles around somebody that's not in real estate, not in insurance and everything, much the way, I could probably talk circles around somebody that's not in the know, if I wanted to take advantage of somebody. So I have a very good network now because I've done it so many times. Wherever you're going, if I don't already have a person for you or somebody that I have worked with in the past with great results, I will absolutely find you somebody that would pass my ethics test and knowledge test, somebody that I would put my name on, basically handing you over to that person. So when you do that referral, that agent then becomes their primary agent. But because I care, what I do is actually work through that whole transaction behind the scenes. A lot of agents, they just push people off on referrals and they're like, all right, wipe my hands, I'm clean, I'm done. Whatever happens, happens. And, I think that is just, that's wrong. Why would you not be a value added to that transaction? You have a whole separate set of eyes and knowledge base and everything, that can look over the contract, look over the mortgage that you're getting, look over, if they're suggesting X, Y, and Z for inspections. Having that extra set of eyes there, you're not the sole, SME or subject matter expert. So it's less likely for you to get taken advantage of because you have somebody QCing that professional even from states away. So, it's basically just trying to keep people honest. There are honest realtors out there, but like you said, it's incentivized for people to get across the finish line and close no matter what. So, I think that there is a huge value added on having somebody that'll not only vet people and point people in the right direction, but stick with them behind the scenes and help out that realtor either, through negotiations or through helping people, shop for mortgage rates and getting the best deal possible. I mean, I've done that for two referrals now. They helped as far as, showing the houses, writing up the contract on their state form and everything. But I pretty much basically did everything behind the scenes, from inspection reports, basically going over all that stuff with them. And then, basically doing all the mortgage rate shopping for like a week and a half. So, I mean, it's not just a handoff deal. I want you to save the most money, and I want you to get in a position to where you're not going to get taken advantage of by somebody. So, if I can stay in the loop there and stay hands-on from Florida and make sure that, you have somebody to text or talk to, while whatever else is going on with the other agent, that's a value added. I mean, so it sounds super cheesy, but yeah, I care. I care because I've been taken advantage of in the past, and it left such a mark on me that, I'm probably one of the few realtors to tell you, like, I hate realtors, so it's, I want to make a positive impact on especially military families, because that's where I come from and everything. Giving back to military guys is always near and dear to my heart. But I want to make sure that there is a value added in everything that I'm doing. Even if I'm passing you off to somebody else to work with, I still want to be with you through that whole process and make sure that you win and get across the closing table with the most amount of money in your pocket so that nobody's taking advantage of you. So that's my ultimate goal for any of that.
Great place to wrap it up. Hopefully everybody listening that's in the market, buyer or seller, can reach out to you and get that perspective, work with someone in their local area, have you do that vetting. And I think that's a really very valuable service. Where can people reach out to you to set that up if they're interested?
I have social media, obviously Facebook, Instagram, website, www.Gregg, Gregg, so two G's at the end, Costin, COSTIN.com. Search for me, phone number 850-266-5005. I mean, I basically live on my cell phone now. I got people as far as UAE that are contacting me for help. So, I mean, I'm pretty much like a around the clock deal. I go to bed at midnight, 1 a.m. and I'm up at like 6 or 7 a.m., starting it all over again. So, I mean, feel free to shoot me a text, email, hit me up on social media, whatever the case may be.
Cool. We'll make sure that whatever information you want in the show notes as far as contact is there. Brian, you got anything else?
No, man, Greg, thanks for coming on, man. It's always good to have another pure blood here with us doing something to help other people.
Always a pleasure with you guys, man. So,
all right. Well, we'll wrap it up there, and yeah, hit up Gregg if you need any help with your real estate transactions.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.
Cheers, y'all.